If ever there was a time for a candle in the darkness, this would be it. Using a spark of hope, kindle the flame of love, ignite the light of peace, and feed the flame of justice. Melanie Davis. Welcome. I'm Steve Rittenmeyer, worship leader this morning, and we welcome everyone here, and particularly our guests. We invite all to our worship service this morning, all faith backgrounds, all racial identities, all gender identities, orientations, and expressions, without regard to political perspectives. We're grateful for the gift of our lives and the gift of other people in our lives. Each of us is created with dignity and worth. We are called to love one another and to do nothing to others that we would find hateful to ourselves. We honor the many ways that people live and love. Our common life is enriched when queer, transgender, bisexual, lesbian, and gay people can come out, sharing the gifts of their sexual orientation and gender identity. True justice flourishes when all people can live and flourish. We suffer, however, when LGBTQ people are oppressed, excluded, or shamed by religious people who overlook the fundamental call to love one another. Love does not exclude. We are all worthy. May we work to build a world where all people are celebrated and loved. We celebrate sexual and gender diversity as a blessing that enriches us all. Anonymous. Please join me in the affirmation of covenant. Love is a doctrine of this church. The quest for truth its sacrament, and service its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the good. Thus do we covenant with one another. At times, we're forced to confront the terrible things that happen to us and to others. When these things happen, all we can do is come together and search for hope. There is still love. There are still good-hearted people who can look unblinking into a storm and continue to believe a calm, bright morning will come. We can help others keep that ember of hope alive when all the world seems intent on dousing it, and use this little ember of light as a beacon for the rest of the world. Our Share the Plate organization this month is Hope Works. For more information about Hope Works, which is a new program sponsored by Jackson House to assist the homeless, see the video on the UUVC website. Our offering is one way that we can share our small embers of light in a dark world. This morning, all checks will go to Hope Works. Please give generously so that we can together help spread that light.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing in dark and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain, singing, calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.
Good morning. For our sermon this morning, I selected the title, The Road Not Taken, by Robert Frost, his poem. To set it up, I chose this reading. It's from Stacey Abrams' new book, Leading from the Outside. And she calls it Dare to Want More. Leadership is difficult. Convincing others and yourself that you are capable of taking charge, capable of achieving more, requires insight and courage. There are challenges that hinder women, people of color, the working class, members of the LGBTQ community. Even as adults, we tend to edit our desires until they fit our own construction or someone else's of who we're supposed to become, where we are expected to stay. Whether we come from working class neighborhoods or grow up comfortably middle class, minorities rarely come of age explicitly thinking about what they want and how they're going to get it. People already in power almost never have to think about where they belong in the room, much less if they would be listened to once inside the room. These men, and usually they are men, and usually they are white, do not have to grapple with low expectations based on gender or race or class. Ambition for them begins with reminiscences of all the times and older friendships and new alliances. The ends have already been decided, with only the means yet to be discussed. Minority leaders often lack faith. They don't know how to take the leap from accepting their fate to actually changing it. And not just a little, but radically. We want something, but what it is remains hazy. Often we cannot articulate our goals because they lie just beyond the reach of who we are supposed to be. Ambition's scale is irrelevant. What holds us back is not scope, it is fear. So we must look inward, not simply at our fears of losing, of not being sufficient, but it's a great difference living our ambitions that can make the world succeed. When we win, when we succeed, we achieve beyond ourselves. We become models for others both known and unknown, who see our victories as proof that they too can succeed. Even by simply embracing ambition, talking about it, trying it out, failing, we mentor others to see their potential. And by going beyond our own limits, we change the places we inhabit. Blessed be.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we'll walk hand in hand someday. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my
The hymn we just listened to can be problematic for some. The song intends for, obviously, the freedom of people of color in this country. And some would say that it's inappropriate for people that are white who already have freedom to think of themselves being set free as well. And yet the truth of the matter is, even if you're not a person of color, you're held captive to an idea of how our culture is supposed to work that is not healthy for us or anyone. Now for the sermon, The Road Not Taken. Let's start with the poem itself. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though, as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubt if I shall ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. There's some interesting criticism of that poem. When you mention it, it's not someone says, "Oh yes, I know that poem." The road less traveled. They think of it in terms of what the poem actually meant for them rather than the actual title. But there's a criticism that goes like this: the road not taken seems straightforward. A nameless traveler is faced with a choice, two paths forward with only one to walk. And everyone remembers the traveler taking the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. But for a century or more, readers and critics have fought bitterly over what the poem really says. Is it a paean to the triumph of self-assertion, where an individual boldly chooses to live outside of community? Or a biting commentary on human self-deception, where a person chooses between identical roads and yet later romanticizes the decision as life-altering? Because again it says, both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. But later, we'll romanticize our journeys. We all do that. We talk about how we were unique, or those turning points where we made the life-changing decision. I grew up I came of age in the 1960s, and I remember, all the hyperbole we created around the fact that we were the greatest nation on earth. And I felt like it was a resurgence of that claim because we were engaged in the Vietnam War, which, regardless of how you think about it, in retrospect, we've pretty much decided as a nation that it was either a mistake or it wasn't worth the price we paid for a generation of soldiers and sailors and airmen, etc., Marines. But we all do it. I, for instance, like to think that I married the greatest woman on earth. And I'll tell you, my mom would probably take umbrage with that. But it's okay to romanticize our own life, as long as we don't deceive ourselves about what our history truly is. So, in the Latin version of the Bible, there's a phrase, imago Dei. Imago Dei implies that we humans reflect God's image. Excuse me, not that God is human, but that we reflect God's divine nature in our ability to achieve rational understanding, creative liberty, and the capacity for self-transcendence. And that's all humans, regardless of our religion, culture, politics, or gender. And in our Unitarian Universalist tradition, we value curiosity and conscience, inquiry and imagination. And we hold, just as Robert Ingersoll did, that questions without answers are so much preferable to answers that you cannot question. Now, March is Women's History Month. I hope you get a chance to see the beautiful altar decorations behind me on the wall. March is Women's History Month. So I'd like you to play a game with me this morning called What If? I like questions without answers. What if humans had continued to imagine God as feminine instead of masculine? Would the universe evaporate? What if the story of God's only begotten child had turned out to be a daughter? Would our planet implode? What would life be like today if religions had given equal status to women all along? Would half our clergy, our priests, imams, rabbis, even popes, cardinals be women? Would this disrupt or violate some vast eternal plan? What would our nation be like today if women had been invited to participate in its inception? You know, history says that elders of the Iroquois Confederacy, noted for the peaceful nature of their governance, when asked to consult Ben Franklin and other founding fathers, their first question was, where are the women? And how can you construct a society when the wisdom and sensibility of half its people are excluded from participating? What would this hemisphere be like if the Europeans had actually left religious persecution behind? That's what they were claiming, that they left religious persecution behind and yet dragged the Inquisition with them when they came. Would we have had witch trials in Salem, I wonder? Would we have participated willingly in the genocide of the indigenous population here? Would we have even brought a person of color here to be our slave? There were 7 million natives on this continent, dispersed in 600 tribes. When the first European ships arrived, and by 1900, only 250,000 out of 7 million remained. After smallpox had wiped out the natives in a 300-mile radius around their new settlement, Governor Winthrop wrote in his diary, God had thereby cleared our title to this place. God had had a hand in decimating the indigenous people around their settlement. It's reported that in 1763, a British general here knowingly gave blankets infected with smallpox to the natives, eventually killing thousands of men, women, and children. Some reports said as much as 500,000 men, women, and children died from that. You know, once we recognize that wrong exists, we must work to change it every day. That's a seminal point that Stacey Abrams makes in her book. And so I want to ask these other questions then this morning for us to ponder as we enter this new time in our life. What is a health system for? What is its purpose? What is its goal? Is it to ration wellness? Or is it to care for the people here? Financially, we know now that our nation spends more per capita for health care and yet have more people uninsured than all the other industrial nations. What is an economic system supposed to accomplish? Is it a strategy for wealth accumulation or material gain? Whenever I contemplate our economic system, I'm reminded that the game Monopoly was invented in the 1920s during the, or was it the early 30s? And it was during the Great Depression. It was an important game, and it caught fire and became very, very popular because the premise is everybody starts out with the same amount of money. And therefore, whatever happens during the game of Monopoly happens because of chance. Maybe a little bit of strategy, but the dice do not know who is rolling it. And I like to play poker. And we like to think that everybody has a chance, the same equal chance in poker, but I promise you that if you sit down to a game of poker, whether it's 7-card stud, Texas Hold'em, whatever, if you sit down at the table with $500 and somebody else sits down with $5, no matter how good a card player they are, you will eventually have their money. I had something came onto my feed this morning, and it asked me not to be offended, so I'm going to ask you not to be offended. But it said, let me see if I can remember exactly what it said. I wrote it down. It said, okay, how about this? No more billionaires. That's billionaires with a B. After you reach 999 million, every red cent goes to schools and education. And you get a trophy that says, I won at capitalism. And then we'll name a dog park after you. Oh my goodness. And there was another one too. It was a picture of 3 guys sitting at a table. The one in the middle was a white man in a suit, and he had a plate mounded with cookies. The guy to his left was a white guy in a hard hat, obviously a construction worker, blue collar. And then to his right, oh, by the way, he had 1 cookie on his plate. And to the right was a person of color, a man, who had no plate at all. And the guy in the middle with the plate full of cookies is turned to the one with the hard hat and says, be careful. The foreign-looking guy wants your cookie. It is funny, but it's also extremely sad. And so I'll continue with my questions. What's an educational system for? Is it so we can understand what a democratic republic is? Can we understand how our government works? Can we understand the stability required, the graciousness that's required for us to have a multicultural, multiracial, multi-generational system that actually works for us? What is a political system for? Is it to smooth out the rough edges? Is it to make sure that greed doesn't take over, that we don't use some sort of hidden military strength or power to bludgeon somebody else into oblivion? What is a political system for if not to be fair and equal, to allow the laws to be administered the same, for everyone to be protected as a human being where they live? You know, one of the great disconnects early on in the development of our nation, and I'm not sure I knew this early on when I was studying political science, but we all know that Tom Paine and others had a great influence on Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, Paul Revere, etc. But in the end, they were able to declare that people from Africa were only 3/5 human, 60% human. And they also split from the elders of the Iroquois Confederacy over the following issue: the ownership of property. Now, can you imagine the hubris? And we still live in this. That I bought my home here in the village, and one day it's going to be paid for, and when I die, it goes to my children, to their children's children, and we're in perpetuity. In a planet that's only been here for, what, 4 billion years, in a universe that's 14 billion, that I get to own a piece of this earth forever, or through my children. That's insane. That's just incredible. And yet, that was the main thing that split us off from the Iroquois Confederacy and what they were trying to help us to achieve, because obviously 600 tribes of 7 million people. They weren't always peaceful. Don't get me wrong. It's not, we don't need to glorify humanness, because we all can suffer aberrations of greed, hatred, fear, etc. But we can also be kind and generous and grateful, and we can find our higher purpose. But over the ownership of property, we split and took this road that we've taken. So I often wonder, what would have happened if we had tried to live off the land and treated it as like it was our Mother Earth, Father Sky, Sister Moon, and Brother Ocean. Glaring inequities in our culture defy the shadows. We cannot expect a different outcome if we persist in maintaining our present obstinance to the truth. Religion, above all, should lead us to justice, not condone its absence. It should lead us towards the equality that can create a hate-free, prejudice-free future. I sometimes feel as though religion is used as an invisibility cloak. You know, like the one that Harry Potter had in his stories, where the Christians like to, or all religions really, like to use the invisibility cloak, so that all you hear is the pronouncements that we all share: love your neighbor as yourself, etc. But with the invisibility cloak, we can't see them violate their own values. Just like Stacey Abrams suggests, sometimes we have to lead from the outside. We are, after all, here as Unitarian Universalists, a minority religion. I don't know any other way to say that. In spite of our love of the promises we make to each other, and 200 plus years here on this continent and more behind in Europe, we are an insanely minor religion. So what do we do? Stacy says in her book that when you know what's right and you know what's wrong, you're obliged to do what's right for the rest of your life. Now, I've had one of my shots, expecting another one in 3 weeks. I'm hoping all of you will have your shots here before too much longer. And like the experts say, maybe we can actually lift this veil of fear and caution and reconnect with each other and begin again on our path of creating beloved community together. And in doing that, release us to be adamant that we're going to work our way into the room where it happens. You remember that Hamilton musical? I love that. I want to be in the room where the decisions are made. And I want us to be heard when we're in that room. We have the power to do that, especially this church in the Unitarian Universalist Association. You have given this church assets of conscience, kindness, curiosity, and time, talent, and treasure that we can turn and face the issues of the day. I wrote this the other day. I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't know how all this is going to turn out. I really don't. But we don't need to know the future to begin it. We simply need the courage to embrace the future with fortitude and purpose and grace. So, where do we begin again to achieve that rational understanding, that creative liberty, and the capacity for self-transcendence that we get from that phrase, imago Dei, that we are created in the image of what is sacred and precious? How do we begin to gain those back, regardless of our religion, regardless of our culture, regardless of our politics, and regardless of our gender? So just remember these two phrases. Imago Dei, and we are precious, all of us. Amen. Well, I hope you enjoyed the dramatic moment. It's great to see all those new faces taking charge of our planet. But for my charge to you today is really more of a prayer and a request. Spirit of many names, mystery beyond all naming, we pray this morning for all, known and unknown, who have suffered during this pandemic, those who have struggled to keep their businesses alive, those who are homeschooling their children, our first responders and medical professionals who are giving us the very best, their very best in these uncertain times. And especially for those who have perished and the families hurting by these losses, we offer our support. So what will you aspire to this year, my friends? Will you breathe in peace and breathe out love? Whatever you decide, may we begin to build a brave new world. Let's sing. Peace be with us.
Peace be with us till we meet again. Nature's beauty will surround us. Loving kindness all around us. Peace be with us till we meet again. Peace be with you till we meet again. May our fellowship enfold you, kindred spirits here uphold you. Peace be with you till we meet again.
Best friends never go out of style. They won't